Hello everyone, and welcome to D20 in Disguise, your source for expertise on world building, storytelling, and miniature making. In today's video, we're going to be discussing a very common yet sometimes confusing task that every GM, every game master has to push through: planning sessions. Now, in concept, this is a simple process, but it can really get confusing where to start. There's so many things that you need to cover, so many things that you need to create, flesh out, design, that it can become confusing. However, I've designed a process over the years that has really helped me plan out my sessions, so I'm going to be sharing that with all of you. If you do end up enjoying today's video, then please be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my uploads. But without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Welcome to D20 in Disguise. Now, there's one vital, absolutely vital question that you have to ask yourself when you start designing a session. What's the goal? Now, this goes two ways. What's the goal of the players, and what's your goal as the GM? Now, the goal of the session can vary quite a bit. It can be geographical. Maybe the players are trying to get to a certain place and have to pass through certain geographical obstacles to get there. Or perhaps they're trying to get close to an NPC. That's also a goal. Or maybe they're trying to get a certain object or find a certain piece of information. That's also a goal. Now, you want to keep this goal of the players glued in your mind. And you also have to recognize, what is your goal as the GM in this session? Maybe it's to creep out your players just a slight bit. Or maybe it's to humor your players, or help your players enjoy the session as much as possible, which, by the way, should always be a goal of yours, no matter what you're doing in a session. But you as a GM can have different goals depending on the session. Now, going back to the player's goal of the session, depending on what this goal is, they're going to have to take certain steps to achieve that goal. And that is where you need to start mapping out what they could possibly do to achieve that goal. For example, if they are trying to get to a certain place, then there's probably different paths they could take to get to that place, and different obstacles they would face depending on the path they took. Therefore, you need to flesh out those paths and what they might encounter. Or, if they're trying to get close to an NPC, that is their goal of the session, then you need to identify that NPC and flesh them out and flesh out their interests and the other NPCs which they may be associated with, so the players can use those connections to get close to that NPC. For example, I just recently ran the first session of a new campaign of mine where the players are hunting down a hellhound that is hopping between interdimensional planes. Now, to chase down this hellhound, they need to first find a way to get to another plane. And to do this, they have multiple different options. First, they could sail off the edge of the map and find a portal there. Secondly, they could find a portal somewhere in the material plane where they already are. Third, they could find a place which is a link between the Shadowfell or the Feywild. And fourth, they could use a magic item or a spell to get to another plane. I also ranked these so that, this is the most likely, from what I know of my players, from what I know of the characters' backgrounds, that this is the most likely thing that they're going to do. And this is the second most likely, third most likely, fourth most likely, and so on and so forth. From there, I fleshed out the first most likely the most out of the four. Then I fleshed out the second most likely a little bit less, and continued down the line. This very systematic approach of designing sessions really helps take out the confusion of, where do I even start? Where do I begin? Where do I go from here? And in my opinion, really helps the process go a lot more smoothly. Now, of course, the goal of a singular session is not all there is. There's also the overarching villain and the overarching plot of the campaign. And you need to remember to tie in each session back to the campaign. If you don't tie it in back to the campaign, it won't feel cohesive. So, to do this, you should drop down little hints in the session, hinting back to the campaign. They can either hint back to something which the players have already encountered and link the present and the past together, or they can foreshadow, looking forward to something that might happen in the future. Now, these little hints don't necessarily need to be found by the players. If they pass up a hint or two, that's perfectly fine. But if they do find them, and later down the line, it was foreshadowing something that happened, they could look back and say, oh, it all connects. It all adds up. That makes sense. And that epiphany, that realization, is one of the best feelings you can have as a player. And that goal of yours as a GM to help the players enjoy the game as much as possible has been achieved. Now, of course, these hints can also link back to the past, to something that has previously happened. And in that same way, they still cause that realization of that connection. And in my opinion, these small connections really help a world feel alive and moving and changing and connected. Now, going back to the main goal of a session, I previously said that you should flesh out the different things which they might use to achieve that goal, and they might go through to achieve that goal. Now, what exactly should those things be? Well, that can vary a lot depending on the goal. If it's geographical, it could be a location. If it's social, it could be people or things. If it's combat-based, it could be different monsters, different enemies, different villains, and the list goes on and on. However, I find that especially NPCs and monsters are two things that you should definitely focus on in this respect. Combat and social encounters are two of the three facets of D&D, aside from exploration, which, if you want to add locations to this list of important things that you should flesh out, go right ahead. However, I personally think that NPCs and monsters really add a lot to a session. They make the people of the world come alive. Now, finally, there's one more thing that you can do which will make your life so much easier when planning sessions and even campaigns overall. You need to ask your players questions. You can ask them, what did I do right in the last session? What did I do wrong in the last session? What do you guys want to see more of in the campaign coming up? What do you guys want to see more of in the session coming up? What kind of magical items do you want your characters to have? Do you want more storytelling or more combat in the game? All of these different questions really make your life easier and also improve the enjoyment of your players overall, because the players will start doing some of the work for you. Now, of course, you can't just completely rely on what your players are saying, or your game will become bland, but adding in once in a while that little pinch of something which a player asked for really adds some real enjoyment to the game, and really puts you, the GM, as a person who cares about the players and really wants them to have fun. And that is the end goal of a GM. You want your players to have fun. And asking your players questions can help you get to that goal so much faster and so much easier. Anyway, that just about covers it for the basics of how to plan out your sessions for any sort of tabletop RPG. Of course, these rules don't just apply to D&D. They apply to pretty much any tabletop RPG because they aren't rule-based. Instead, they're focused on you, the GM, telling a story and using a certain process to better tell that story. Once again, if you did end up enjoying today's video, then be sure to hit all of those buttons down below. And you all have a great day. Keep on creating, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.